In less than 2 years, I've managed to become a 4.0 GPA student at the best university in my country, the University of Toronto, and one of the best universities in the world. If you watch until the end of this video, you're going to learn exactly why you keep getting bad grades. And I'm going to do this by sharing 3 different things that I've realized over time as being a student that kept getting me bad grades. And so if you watch this, you're going to learn exactly how to avoid them. And so the first realization that I've had as a student, and one of the most important ones that I keep telling people nowadays, is that I realized that I was more of a passive student. I was not an active student. And so what this means is that I never did active studying. I would just read the textbook just for the fun of it, or not for the fun of it, but just for the sake of finishing the task. But I'd never read the textbook like in correlation with like, oh, I'm trying to actually learn. I'm trying to actually get something out of this. But it was more of like, oh yeah, I just need to get this done because the teacher said so, or people say it's good, so I just do it. Where I go to the lecture, not with the hopes and the intention of learning more, but just with, again, just finishing the to-do list. And so we're just programmed nowadays just to have like a huge to-do list and just try to be productive, but not actually with any intentionality. And so if you want to become a student who actually memorizes stuff, then you need to be an active student. And so if you know anything about memory, then you know that you need to study actively. You need to be learning actively in order to store things from your short memory and transferring them into your long-term memory. Because if you think about it, why would your brain store everything? Your brain is not going to store everything into long-term memory because it's not significant enough. You need to show it why this one thing is significant enough for it to actually store it in your long-term memory. But if you're treating this lecture or this textbook reading just like anything else in your life, just like watching a YouTube video or scrolling on Reels, and you're not putting any effort and intensity into it, then it's not going to store it, and it shouldn't, right? But if you make this experience different and make it stand out from everything else that you do day to day, then that increases your chance of actually storing it into your long-term memory. And so I've heard Andrew Huberman once say that if you want to actually store stuff into your memory, into your long-term memory, then after your study session, you need to trigger your brain with a rush of epinephrine or adrenaline. And so he says, yeah, I just go in the cold shower or I go for exercise. The whole point behind this idea is that you need to make it different, stand out. You know, you can't be in a passive state. Adrenaline means like you're in an active state, you're under stress or something, right? And so when you're studying, you need to actually focus. Sometimes it means your head will actually hurt. You'll get a migraine because you're just really focused. And so what I started doing is reading in my textbook using an active method. It's called the SQ3R method, which I can dive in a lot more in another video because it's going to take a while. But the gist of it is that you read a section of the textbook. Don't read 50 pages at a time, but let's say you read a page at a time, 2 pages at a time, and then bring your notebook, and without looking at your textbook, use something called active recall, and again, actively try to recall and retrieve the information that you just saw. And this method is just called like kind of micro retrieval, because the macro retrieval is more like I have to remember this 2 weeks from now or like a month from now, but micro retrieval is like, oh, I'm remembering it 10 minutes later. But this way you learn if you're actually putting enough focus into your study sessions. Because if you can't remember anything, then it's like, okay, I'm just reading, but I'm not zoned in. I'm just zoning out thinking about something else. The thing is, even though you need to put more effort in, it means that you'll spend less time studying. And I call this the effort time exchange. You're gonna have to choose to either put enough effort and therefore decrease the time needed, or put less effort but then increase the time needed in order to get the same amount of studying and learning. And so if you want to get the same amount of learning but in a less amount of time, then you need to increase your effort. And so that's why I always recommend doing your work first thing in the morning, because that's when you have the most energy and focus and mental clarity to do the work. And so number 1 is just changing yourself from being a passive student to an active student. Number 2 is being adapted to different learning styles. So again, there's a fancy name for it. It's just being an omni-learner, which means that you're adapted and you can learn using many different styles. And so the acronym for this is VARK, V-A-R-K. And so, you can either be a visual learner, an auditory learner, R is like for reading, and then K is kinesthetic, so more like practical. And so visual learning is probably like looking at your professor, or watching a podcast, something like that, right? Or watching an online lecture. And then auditory is just like audiobooks, or even is included in a lecture or a podcast because you're getting the audio as well. R, reading, is more like reading the textbook, reading lecture slides, and the kinesthetics is more like the labs that you do at university. And so if you want to become like the ultimate or like the final boss student, then you need to be well adapted and be able to learn from every single of these styles. Because you might be good at just visual learning, which a lot of students are, and you might be good at reading because you've just been conditioned to do that all your life, just read, read, read. Or you might not be good at reading because you hate reading and you never actually practice that skill, but you're good at like auditory and visual, and maybe some of you are good at kinesthetics as well. First of all, find out and really try to think about, where do I get most of my learning from? And so for me, it's a lot of visual and a lot of reading. And so how did I exactly improve the other two aspects of my learning styles? For auditory, I just started listening to more podcasts, more audiobooks, when I was driving, when I was in the gym, and try to actually think about what I just listened to. I'm not listening to any music, but I'm listening to actual podcasts because I'm gonna want to remember what I was listening to. If you want to become a better visual learner, then whenever you actually come across a diagram, try to actually read it through. Try to like put together and puzzle together every single little drawing and aspect of the diagram, and try to think about what it's actually trying to show you. Don't just skip past them whenever you see a graph or an image, but rather like genuinely try to like analyze and dissect every little part of the diagram. If you're a bad reader, then again, do the active reading method that I was talking about, SQ3R. And if you want to learn more about that, since I can't really spend an hour or 2 hours explaining every single little detail, then just check out my course, is the first link in the description, and it's going to dive way deeper into everything that I'm talking about in this video. And if you want to become a better kinesthetic learner, then whenever you do have labs, then try to actually focus into it. Don't just chat with your friends the whole time, but try to think about, okay, all right, so he's giving us this procedure, and then I have to actually do it. Like, if you're going to be the student who looks at the lab manual every single time and always like really like focus in detail every 2 seconds because you can't remember stuff, then you're not putting enough focus. Generally try to understand the manual, the procedure. Why are you doing these steps in order? Like, what's the significance of this lab? What's the objective of the lab? What are you doing? And then also just focus on the actual practical skills needed in that lab. And the third reason that I realized I was getting bad grades, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons why you're getting bad grades right now, is because you're a latent learner. And what this means is that you learn things, but you don't test yourself whether you know them. Think about this. It's kind of ridiculous that we learn stuff. We spend like weeks and days and hours every single day like studying for an exam and just learning in general. But when is the first time that you're tested on this material? On test day. The first time you're tested is on test day. So you'll read notes and read textbooks and highlight and reread, but you're kind of just hoping the test goes well. You don't test yourself until the class tests you on with a test. Does that not sound really risky though? And that's kind of when I realized, I was like, oh, like I'm playing this the hard way. Because the more you test yourself and the more you engage in explicit learning versus latent learning, the more you'll actually figure out what are the gaps in my knowledge right now. What are the things that I've not really memorized or stuff that I don't really understand, but I need to know on the test. But if you don't test yourself, it's going to be really hard to actually identify what that is. And so testing can come in a lot of different ways. But my favorite one is just practice questions. Past exams, practice questions, any type of questions that you can use to simulate a very similar experience to test day. Because on test day, you don't talk to anyone. You're just sitting and staring on your paper for an hour straight, 2 hours, and you writing on a paper. If you want to prime yourself to that condition, then just do the same exact thing. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look at anyone. Don't look at the answer key. That's the worst thing that students do, is that they look at the answer key every few questions, right? But then you're just not putting yourself in the same condition. You're not putting enough like risk and like stress into it, because you're like, oh, if I get it wrong, I'll just see in 2 minutes anyways, and then I'll correct it. But put yourself in the thing where it's like, okay, I'm doing this test. I want to get a 90 plus. I want to get a 90% on this practice test right now, right? And so you do it 30 minutes at a time, 1 hour at a time. As you do this at one go. When you start, you don't stop until you finish, and then you check your score. And based on that, you kind of see the questions you got wrong, or the questions that you guessed correctly but you don't really understand. And then that's when you actually do more learning. Even ask ChatGPT. I always do that. I'm like, oh, why did I get this question wrong? Like, what's the question asking? What does this actually imply, right? What do the words actually mean? And so if you can get your hands on like past exams from the same exact professor, like that's the best thing you can do if you want to get good grades. So even though I had to learn the hard way that these were 3 things that were setting me back as a student and getting me not the ideal grades of the top performing student that I wanted to be. But if you genuinely implement the advice in this video, then you're gonna fast track your progress into actually getting the grades that you want. And if you wanted to learn more on how to get consistent good grades and how to become a productive student as well, then just check out my course. It's the first link in the description, and I'll see you there.